Welcome to today's webinar, Helping a Community Heal. I'm Sandy White, and today's discussion will be a powerful one. On behalf of Spectrum Health, we are grateful for the support and positive energy and peace that is coming from our panelists today. What brought us today together? Well, as you know, 10 precious lives were lost on Saturday, May 14th, at the only top supermarket in East Buffalo. 3 other people were also shot, and countless others were traumatized by what they saw that day. Sadly, we're not alone in this. Now 3 more cities, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and Charleston, now share something very painful in common. Our communities were changed forever by a racially motivated crime where innocent people were killed. And today we are talking about healing and hope. I'll introduce our first speaker in a moment. For our audience, there is an opportunity for you to ask questions and share your comments in the chat box here on Zoom and on the Facebook page too. So please join us. But before we begin, panelists, please mute your mics when you're not speaking. And after our panelists speak, we'll answer your questions. We will hear you. Danelle Jones is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she's with us today. She's also a licensed addictions counselor and a certified integrative mental health professional. She is currently the full-time clinician at the Medical University of South Carolina Resiliency Center, where she addresses stress, anxiety, burnout, I didn't raise my hand, and building individual and team resilience. Prior to that, for 3 years, she was one of the dedicated therapists who shared in the experience of faith, hope, strength, and healing of the survivors and those impacted communities of the Mother Emanuel AME Church shooting tragedy that happened in Charleston in 2015. She's also provided trauma-informed care and specialized trauma treatments to individuals who've experienced crime. We welcome you today.
Thank you for having me.
Like to share a few minutes with us?
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here, helping this community heal, in which is such a horrific tragedy, and anything that I can offer. I'm just excited again to be here, and again, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Ms. Chanel. We thank you for being with us today. Next is Brian Schreiber, President and CEO of the Jewish Community Center of Greater Pittsburgh since 1999. He also serves on the board of the Jewish Community Center of North America and had served as the advisory chair of the Greater Pittsburgh Nonprofit Partnership, where he is currently a board member of Standing Firm, the business case to end gender violence. He was also a member of the special task force that developed the 1027 Health Partnership, a resiliency center that served community victims after the shooting of the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh Squirrel Hill neighborhood. We welcome you today, Brian.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Sandy. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. I think first, our thoughts continue to be with the people of Buffalo over these difficult last several months, and hopefully this conversation today will be helpful in understanding. And a thank you to the folks in Charleston. They were in the very early days after the shooting at the Tree of Life facility, were on site, were present, gave us wonderful feedback and support, and we've maintained that relationship. In fact, the Reverend from the AME Church was actually in attendance the day that Andrea's mother was buried. So that's a long relationship and a very treasured one. So we're hopefully can be as helpful as possible.
Thank you so much, Brian. We're building bridges in the midst of it all, and that's the miracle. Our next speaker, Andrea Wetner. She is also from Pittsburgh, and she survived the shooting and tragically lost her mom, Rose Mellinger that day in 2018. Andrea is retired from her profession as a dental hygienist. She remains active member of the Tree of Life Synagogue and is on the steering committee for the 1027 Healing Partnership, where she volunteers in the Friendship Circle. And we welcome you, Andrea, today.
Thank you, Sandy. It's a privilege to take part in this discussion today. I'm very glad to meet all of you, and thank you for watching and taking the time out to hear about community healing, which in these difficult times is so important. I've spoken publicly about what happened at the Tree of Life on October 27, 2018, and it's a story that needs to be told. What happened at the Tree of Life Synagogue was not a tragedy, as it so often has been described. It was a hate crime with tragic consequences, to be sure, and to the most loving people. What is it that transforms everyday people into killing machines spurred on by someone's identity? I'll leave that to the experts and professionals to figure out. But what I can tell you is that it does take a support network to recover, and I'm still feeling it to this day. A friend took it upon herself to set up a meal train so that people who wanted to help with food could do so in an organized manner. We told people to come over early so that we could sit and chat and visit. And these were just the best parts of that. These visits were therapeutic and were as much a part of my healing as any medicine or rehabilitation. My long-standing friendships were enriched, and I rekindled friendships that had gone dormant, and new friendships took root. If the shooting would have happened during the pandemic, with everyone under quarantine and visitation severely limited, my recovery certainly would have suffered. This is what I consider community, and it is unbelievably critical in getting through traumatic events.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we are with you today and beyond. Next, Calais Dumas. She's a licensed clinical social worker. She is with us. She's from Best Self Behavioral Health here in Buffalo, very active there, where she is the chief operating officer. Like the team at Spectrum Health and other professional colleagues, she was actively engaged in providing trauma services at the Johnny B. Wiley Pavilion following the TOPS tragedy. And she's the chairperson and founder of Best Self's Racial Equity and Inclusion Committee. Her team remains on the ground providing culturally responsive mental health support at East Buffalo. And we welcome you, Kelly.
Thank you, Sandy. It is, I don't know if it's a pleasure to be here. I will say that I'm glad to be participating in this discussion. I think these kind of talks for many, it's therapeutic. I myself, as you mentioned, I personally, within an hour of the shootings happening, reported to the site to start providing support. And so I think the trauma that many have felt, it's just so widespread, and healing is long-term. And so I'm still going through some healing process also, because this has impacted the community in different, different the Black community, which is a community, and then the greater community. So I'm glad to be able to participate and get some healing in this process and talk about what the future holds. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, Maleen White. Full disclosure, we share the same last name, but we may be related. No, we're not related. And she is a program manager for Spectrum Health and Human Services. She holds a degree in psychology from SUNY Buffalo State and a master's degree in mental health counseling from Medaille College. She is a licensed mental health counselor who is also trained in eye movement. This is interesting. Desensitization and pre-processing. I want to know about that. She also provides services at Spectrum Health's downtown Buffalo Counseling Center and at the Buffalo City Mission. We welcome Maleen to our gathering. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me and welcoming me to this discussion as well. The top store where the massacre happened, it is in our community. And we want to be a great support for our clients as well as our community members. Of course, this was a senseless, traumatic event, and it has affected all of us, and we can say mainly African Americans within that community. And of course, not forgetting about the struggles around the world with the massacres that are happening everywhere. Um, we truly want to work towards healing and change for all. Thank you.
Yeah, that's it right there. You have to take a deep breath when you even look at the news every morning. I did this morning, and we all must. Finally, Dave Gebo, someone I know very well, and he's the host of Buffalo's What's Next on WBFO. Dave is a broadcast journalist who has worked up and down the dial, notably at WBFO and the former WNED AM 970, and from digital projects to newspapers. With more than 30 years of experience, Dave has produced national television news programs and has worked as both daily and weekly print journalist and web editor. He is currently news director at WBFO and is heavily involved as a host and producer with Buffalo What's Next, WBFO's daily discussion program, which looks at race and other related issues in the wake of the Tops shooting in Buffalo. While not a counselor, but he has been a counselor to me from time to time when I was at WBFO. Journalists have a different role in helping our communities understand and heal. Dave, welcome.
Thank you all. I'm flattered to be amongst a panel that includes a lot of people with a lot of initials after their name. I am just a journalist, and I don't mean that with any sort of false modesty. But I think as communities, I'm guessing the other communities on here could share this, as they move ahead, there does have to be a certain amount of introspection. What is needed in order to heal? What happens after ABC and NBC and CBS and CNN leave town? Our station, in a lot of ways, is committed to examining that entire process. We started this top program that Sandy spoke of right after the shooting, and we are going to continue it. People say, well, when are you going to stop doing it? And I say, when we run out of topics, which basically means never. I think that in order to talk about healing, we have to have a continued dialogue about what community needs. And to that degree, I'm glad to be a part of all of this sort of discussion.
Well, we've been talking about this, Dave, and I'd like to stay with you for a minute. It's a hard question for me to ask as a fellow journalist, but how much is just too much when it comes to consumers hearing news about situations of this magnitude? And we talked about this earlier of how I thought just seeing the same footage over and over again in the Tops parking lot was triggering people, triggered me even. And I even reached out to my colleagues in the news industry and just said, you know, can we find something else? Because people running around screaming in horror is not something we need to see, children need to see on a regular basis. So is there a time when it's just too much, or should there be a little bit more accountability with the media on this?
Yes and yes. I think there is a point when it can be too much, and I think there needs to be accountability. On the other side of that equation, I don't think we should stop covering this. We should stop showing the footage, the triggers. We should maybe stop having the conversations that focus on, oh, what was it like inside the store? As long as we're cognizant of that and looking at what does the discussion need to be now, we can move off of that horrible footage or those really deeply personal stories that can be triggering. Because to stay there and to just do that, absolutely, that would be.
That's the easy thing to do, just to ask that question, right?
Right.
But to dig and get this.
It would be
Go ahead.
triggering, like you said, it would be in that how much is too much category. That to me would be too much. But as long as the coverage evolves and now really starts to look at what the community need is, what the healing process looks like, and all of the issues get raised from that, then I think you can't say there is too much. Then I think you can say that it's still required. What's too much though is, yeah, the repeated triggering stuff that hopefully at most places started to wane after a couple days.
Yeah, it's a balancing act, isn't it?
Absolutely.
All right, Brian, can we go to you here and just talk a little bit about the tragedy, and can something like this define your community? Can it, and let's go over that just briefly, just to update everyone.
Sure. The shooting occurred on a Saturday morning during Sabbath services. It happened, I think, in the first 5 to 10 minutes of worship. So that meant there were 3 congregations that pray at the Tree of Life congregation. So it meant that those that were most dedicated, that were actually there in the pews in the earliest moments, were caught in the crossfire. The JCC, the Jewish Community Center, is about four blocks away from where the shooting occurred. So we became sort of the first responder area. It's where families gathered. It's where the FBI Family Assistance Center gathered. It's where the SWAT teams were early on in the early moments. And I think what we've learned, we're almost 3 years and 9 months from the shooting, though in so many ways it feels like it happened yesterday. Is I think once you're involved, you may not recognize at the beginning, but you're going to be involved over the long run because the needs really continue. I would not like to say that this defined our community. It impacted our community. It impacted the direct victims. It impacted their families. It impacted the congregations, Jewish institutions, community institutions. But it didn't define who we were as neighbors. It didn't define who we were as people. And certainly it also provides an opportunity to remember those lost and the incredible lives that they created, that we really spend a lot of time focusing on that. We don't focus a lot of time and energy on the shooter. We focus a lot of time on those lost and remember what they stood for. And I think we, again, feel a very special kinship with those communities that suffered identity-based violence, because that it's hard enough to be in a club of mass casualty events. It's another piece knowing that people were targeted for who they were and where they were at that particular point in time. And I think that's why we feel particularly drawn to the Charleston and to the Buffalo communities, just understanding what that means and the victimization of that. So, but we do recognize that. So I think that's just all part of the story. It's, again, we don't want to be labeled by this, but we know we're going to be impacted by this for a long time.
What role did faith play in keeping you engaged with faith and hope? That's for you, Brian.
Okay, thank you.
Kind of not on the script, but I just
yeah, no, I
curious.
appreciate that. I think that's a continuum. I think I leaned into that at the beginning. I happen to be a member of Tree of Life. My wife is the immediate past president, so I knew most of the victims. And so I think that faith and being part of community was really part of that. I think faith has continued by looking at the good in people and leaning into the goodness. Squirrel Hill, where we're located, is also Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. So we don't just look at our Jewish faith tradition. Literally right across the street from the JCC is Sixth Presbyterian Church, where Mr. Rogers prayed every week. And that's where a rally to combat violence happened the night of the shooting. So I think we really also look to multi neighbors and multi people. Rabbi Myers from Tree of Life would say that Reverend Manning at the AME Church was his guardian angel that day. They got him through that. So I think that my faith in people is stronger than ever before, and really leaning into the things that are precious. I run into Andrea all the time. Her brother worked at the JC for over 30 years. I saw him last night. So we lean into community, we lean into our faith, but we lean into humanity.
Beautiful, beautiful. Kelly, let's talk a little bit about working on East Buffalo in the community and how you're finding hope is balancing out the shock and despair. I don't know if people understand that, but share with us how that is happening.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of us who have hope and want to have hope. I think a lot of, and there is still a lot of shock fear, despair, all of that. And so just respecting and acknowledging everyone is in different places with this. And I think people want to have hope and want to believe and hope that something good is going to come from this, something better, that is not going to go back to how things were, that kind of created a situation right for a situation like this, a horrific act like this to happen. I think some of that in terms of people being able to maintain hope is going to be based a lot on what happens from here. You know, that first question we were talking about, how much is too much in terms of the media. I think that we have to be able to continue to talk about those situations, what the situations that led up to an incident like this occurring. So no, we don't need to keep focusing on the graphic details and that those things are traumatizing, but we have a problem. We have a big, big problem in Buffalo. We have a race issue. We always have had a race issue. We're one of the most racially segregated cities in the country. You know, that neighborhood was so distraught of resources and what's needed prior to this. So it created a situation that really made that kind of fueled this incident happening. You know, that supermarket, it just happened to be Tops, but that neighborhood. And so being able to really talk about the systemic racism, and all the systems that really kind of set this up, and what are we going to do to change that? And so I think people can hold on to hope if we're going to really talk about the real issues and look to make change. And so I'm hoping, as many are hoping, that we continue to talk about this and then change our talk into real actions that are going to change a lot of things in Buffalo to make it better.
Very briefly, I've heard that a plan is always important when you want change to take place. So with the Tops reopening, do you think that has brought some hope to the community?
I think it's brought a lot of different things to different people. I think realistically, everyone understands that Tops really needed to open. That was you had so many people who that's the only grocery store that they were able to get to. And
there's seniors in that area.
And there's seniors. And I'm hoping that there will continue to be discussions of how we bring more. There shouldn't just be that one in the neighborhood. So that one needed to open. And hopefully there will be discussions on how do we not have that be the only one. So I think it did restore, it's different for many different people who felt it.
Brought about that community conversation.
Yes.
Needs to be, that should have been taken place a while ago.
That's right.
Got it. Thank you so much. Andrea, first of all, even though it's, my heartfelt condolences on the loss of your mom, and your faith is strong to return to the same place of worship, I understand. Did you consider finding a new house of worship? And what was your first time back in the synagogue like for you?
I grew up at the Tree of Life congregation. My parents had been members there since before it was at its current location in Squirrel Hill. I was confirmed there. I was married there almost 40 years ago. My children were bar mitzvah there. My nieces and nephews were
That's your place. That's your place of worship.
Our place, yes. So I never had any thoughts of leaving Tree of Life. It never entered my mind that I would go anywhere else to worship. But I have not been back in the building since I walked out of there on October 27th. At times, the building was available for those who wanted to enter with an escort, but I declined. I was there that day. I didn't need to relive it, but I will be proud to enter the new Tree of Life and will do so without hesitation or fear.
Sandy, just one point is that the building sustained some significant damage in the shootout with the shooter. So the facility has sort of been ice, so to speak, and the tree of life. Congregation's been praying at a different congregation until
Got it.
such time that things are rebuilt and there's plans for that. So that's part of the context, but physically it's still standing and people can drive by it, et cetera.
Thank
And we
you.
we walk by it often. I'm fine seeing it from the outside, but I have no desire to go inside as it is now.
Understood. Thank you so much. Maleen, as a counselor, I'd like to speak with you for a minute. Should schools engage more counselors? I've often thought that schools need counselors to have deeper conversations with students who may be harboring harmful thoughts. As I remember being in school, there were a lot of kids that just needed support. They just need someone to talk to. This is going way back. So what are your thoughts on this?
Sure, yes, we definitely need a lot of support. Of course, we're aware that there are many adults that carry out mass shootings for whatever reasons. But when we discuss our young people, I feel that preventative school-based mental health and behavioral services are important. School guidance counselors, they guide the children in lots of areas like career and social development, as well as emotional concerns. But it's my belief that we should work closer together in identifying those deeper conversations, that dialogue, right, of mental health, hate, lack of understanding, and uncertainty. When we talk about preventative measures, this means that we should get ahead of this thing by trying to identify things like early warning signs, what they look like, possible mood changes, self-esteem concerns. When these young people have problems at home, what about jealousy, possible bullying in schools?
I was going to mention that. That seems to be a common thing we're hearing.
Right? Isolating at home and at school, racism, right? Because this is big. It causes such division. Intrusive thinking, we don't know that there's intrusive thinking until things like this happen. Setbacks, such as underachieving in their academics. Social and emotional development issues can cause issues when they get in higher grade levels, as well as when they become adults. If there's hate being fueled and filled within our children, then we should use our platform to promote awareness. I think a sense of true understanding, let the children, the young people feel like they're being heard, to be able to have honest answers, and importantly, support when we see that the barriers are being broken and the walls are coming down and they're getting some understanding from us adults. It's a different level. I don't know how much a guidance counselor guides the children when they're in school as far as mental health, but I know that if we came together and collaborated, then I think the more information, the more awareness, I think change is possible. Change is possible because it has to start with the young ones.
And then we have adults that are walking around that are embedded in hateful ideologies that some of us didn't think even existed, but many of us knew was present. How do you deal with that?
Well, and that's the unfortunate part, because when we have adults who are racist and sit at the dinner table, how do they fuel our young people? And then the young people have to go to the school, of course. And now what happens? Is there intrusive thinking because of what they've been told at home? It's unfortunate, but when it comes to the adults, it's still about talking about these things, having the dialogue, opening up, creating some supports, making sure that we're having the conversations, because every time a mass shooting happens or an adult does something in this manner, a lot of people are like, nope, he meant to do it, she meant to do it. It's just violence, there's no mental health. Well, I think a little differently.
What do you think?
Well, it takes a technical mind to write out anything more than 20 pages, okay? Even college is a difficult place. Even in schools, when somebody tells you you have to write a dissertation, it's like, whoa. So when we talk about even just that little piece of this, you all, because I know it's bigger, but when we talk about just that little piece, that brings concern. That brings a lot of concern and hatred. Where does it come from? Where does it come from? Because if someone says they hate Black people or they hate Mexicans or whatever color or creed, then where does that come from? It doesn't come from that young 12-year-old. It came from a deeper source, an older source, someone who's probably held on to these feelings and emotions for some time. So yeah, we still have to have these forums and have some conversations and try to make sure there's some awareness so that way we can make sure that people know that this is not okay. And we're not going to continue to let it grow. We're not going to continue to let it grow. Even if it's just in dialogue, this is important. This is important. And it's awesome that we have a panel here of white and Black, right? Because and any other creed, because we have to be able to say we stand united together in saying this is not okay. And we need to create a world where color is not the most important thing.
Well, Dr. King talked about that and that dream. And very quickly, I remember as a 12-year-old, maybe a little younger, and my sisters and brother, there were 5 of us. We moved from the east side to a beautiful part of the city, the north side, Buffalo. My father worked so very hard. We were walking around playing jacks and the neighbor yells at us with venomous, the eyes are evil, called us the N-word, and we're just playing outside. We looked up, we're like, why is she so angry with us? So that's what we're dealing with, you know, and something like that affected me back then. And I look at people very carefully, even today, because I said there's something inside of people that makes them go to the dark side.
Can I say before we move on, can I just say that here at Spectrum, I work with adults. I work with adults and again, all colors and creed. And my clients are disturbed. My clients are upset. My clients don't understand why someone would want to hurt other people in this way. I say that because I know as we talk about young people, I want it to be known that I work every day with all different people. And no one is walking in here and saying, good, it happened. You know, no one is walking in here with malice or with negative vibes. People are coming in and they're concerned and they're hurt.
Sure, sure. And they're looking for direction and understanding of how could this happen? Yes, but this is the world we live in, and it's just a blessing that all of you are here with us for this discussion. And we're kind of leaning towards each other, lifting each other up as we speak, because these types of bridges are important as we heal and move forward. All of you are engaged in some way of helping one another, helping the people. And we know we pray for you, as this is my personal prayer for you as you continue to go on, because it's not easy, and I understand. Andrea, as a volunteer for 1027 Center, what is your role in the friendship circle? If you could share that.
Sure. The 1027 Healing Partnership and the Friendship Circle are 2 separate organizations. The 1027 Healing Partnership was formed from funds provided by the federal government as a safe place to help with local trauma after a shooting. As a family member of a deceased and as a survivor, I was asked to be a part of the working group to get the organization established. And then I transitioned into the steering committee to provide guidance and ideas to allow the organization to help the Pittsburgh area. Separately, the Friendship Circle was established in 2006, and their programs engage youth and adults with diverse abilities in a full range of social activities. And while it is run by a Jewish family organization, it caters to all ages and all backgrounds. My role there centers on their baking events. I'm an avid baker. And
what do you bake?
Cookies.
I love cookies.
I just love to bake. And I love helping out when they need. They have these pop-up bakeries once a month. So I always help out with that. And while I'm teaching them, I'm also learning things from them. And it's very rewarding. I really enjoy it.
Volunteering is always a lot of fun because you think you're giving something away, but you're getting something back in the meantime. Even though folks are getting cookies, you're getting much more. And this is in Pittsburgh for those that are just tuning in just now, but I'm sure something similar or maybe something could happen here as well. Tanel, could we chat for just a minute? We're trying to get so much in, but we're talking about healing and community and how we have a lot in common. And the unfortunate part for those that are just tuning in is that we have some horrific tragedies that have taken place in our nation. And we're reaching out to folks that are right there on the front line who understand, and we're just communicating with one another with love and support. Tanel, how long did it take to establish the Resiliency Center, and how long was it open? And tell us a little bit about the area and the community.
Yeah, so the Resiliency Center was fortunately, and I'm going to say fortunately and unfortunately, it was a site owned by the church, which is right next to the church. They had to do some renovations to it to make it fit what would be most helpful to the church community. And so it took a little bit, and ideally, which I was really excited about, as soon as the trial ended.
This is in Charleston, for those that are just
Charleston.
tuning in, explaining.
The Mother Emanuel Empowerment Center, which is what we called it, was open. So we had, the families were part of the trial, which was also very taxing. And then now to hopefully come together as a community. So it opened right around October of 2016, November 2016. And it lasted until October of 2019, so 3 years within the center. And what it was about, myself and my other clinical team, we came up with a lot of different healing activities for church members, families, sometimes communities to be a part of. It wasn't like this one size fit all. It was various things, even if it was just overall wellness, right? Because when we experience trauma, it impacts all these other things. Like, so we talked about sleep. How do you engage in very, like healthy sleep habits?
Or post-traumatic stress.
Yes. Right? So I think another really significant benefit to the Mother Emanuel Empowerment Center, I also say even the healing team, is it wasn't just within these four walls, right? So we went where families wanted us to be. We were going to birthday parties. We were going to family reunions to be supportive, because they, if you
meeting them where
loss,
they are, right?
Meeting them where they are. Yes. If when there's grief and loss, your life changes, but life keeps on moving. And so we were there to support as many families as we could. And I think, again, some of my I would say most amazing experience, and have developed some of the most magnificent relationships with individuals impacted by what happened. And so as a therapist, we're trained to you got to go in, you got to be neutral. This is not one of those times where you want to come in and be cold and distant and say, we got boundaries, right? You go in and you be, especially because it was also a faith community. So you are there, you are where they are, you are helping them heal, whether it was in their home, whether it was in church. We went to church services, whether it was the loss of other family members after the tragedy. So there was nothing that I would say the Mother Emanuel Empowerment Center did not do. Because it was part of the AME community, all the AME churches were impacted. So we would do and be involved in other events around the Low Country area, or even in Charlotte. Like we had Charlotte, some of the family members who lived in Charlotte, so we would go there to do events. So the Mother Emanuel Empowerment Center, the location itself was next to Mother Emanuel AME
Perfect.
Church, but the healing was wherever we needed to be.
Amen. I think that people think something like this healing takes place overnight. It's a journey, isn't it?
Yes, it's a journey for sure. Mm-hmm. And it's not a straight journey. It's going to be all ups and downs, and you have to be able to make space for where people are. And I think sometimes when it comes to grief, the biggest challenge is, well, I'm okay, why isn't this person okay? And so definitely avoiding any type of comparisons when individuals are experiencing grief.
I've heard that in terms of grieving, everyone grieves differently. Is you following
Yes.
up on what you're saying, and not to expect someone to act like you when they're grieving, but to be present is the most important thing.
Yes, to be present. So there are some things I try to get the community to say when they're experiencing. I think oftentimes we say, "Hey, how are you? Are you okay?" Right? And so a grieving person doesn't want to burden the other person. They're going to say, "I'm okay," but inside they're not. So for those of you who want to be helpful and want to check on people who've been impacted by any type of grief or loss, maybe just ask them, like really acknowledging, because again, sometimes society tells us to keep moving. Grief, we got to keep moving, be strong, whatever that means. So just simply saying, "Tell me about your grief today. Tell me about your sadness today." And that gives the person permission to really tell you how they're feeling and not necessarily hold back on what they are feeling, so they don't feel like you're being burdened or they're burdening you with what they have going on.
Good advice. Good advice. I remember after the shooting, and I lived like a few blocks away from the Tops Market, people kept asking me, "How are you?" I didn't know how to answer that question, and I still grapple with it. Brian, let's talk to you. You're a civic leader, and how did you work? How did your work help inspire trust to return to the tree of life again?
Sure. Appreciate the questions. First of all, the insights that everybody's sharing, I could relate to almost everything that everybody is saying. So I
Right,
think
right.
maybe in almost reflecting so many pieces is you can see that a mass casualty event and a hate crime brings on, there's so many different layers. There's the layer of the victims, there's the layer of the survivors, there's the layer of the community. There are greater issues. And we experienced all of that at the JCC in Pittsburgh in the Tree of Life community. I think at the beginning, part of this was separating between the actual event itself, trying to help those immediate survivors and witnesses, and the fact that this was the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in American history. So you're sort of standing on this piece of history, and the Jewish world came into Pittsburgh to be part of that journey. But our first piece is that this was a local intimate event. So I think a number of the panelists have really talked about that. And that means that everybody's own journey is going to be different, and we needed to be there. So as a civic leader, part of this, we actually house the Resiliency Center at the JCC. So part of this is to be really, really close and victim centered with those people that are most directly impacted, and yet understand the larger agenda. 15 months before the shooting, we had created a platform and actually had 250 faith leaders in front of the JCC next to this Mr. Rogers Church after the Charlottesville issue, talking about a need to respond to prejudice and hate in all forms. So we had multi-faith, multi-ethnic communities that we were already gathering. So we were in that space. That work continues, but we also maintain that closeness and intimacy to those people most directly impacted by the specific shooting. And I think that's the juxtaposition. And we had to operate a community center, and we went back into business. The shooting happened on a Saturday. Childcare opened up on Monday. Other activities opened up on Monday. It was muted. It was difficult. We helped people through that, but we had to go back to our business. And I think Tanel had spoken about that. We had to go back. Life had to move. We had to care for children, et cetera. That was our mission. So that's been the juxtaposition, I'd say, of the last 3 years and 9 months, is always balancing all of that, because it doesn't go away. The trial has not happened. It's a long, long, long journey for that. So it's a very, very long, arduous process, and you have to prepare now. And it's okay not to be okay. When people ask you, Sandy, sometimes they may want to know the answer. Sometimes, they do, sometimes they don't. But answer it, because it's important.
I've said I'm not okay. I've said that in the past. 2 or 3 days after this, I said I'm not okay, and I didn't want to respond in any negative way, but it was real and raw.
I'll say one other piece, and obviously leave it to other panelists. We leaned into our vulnerability as an institution, as human beings, and I think leaning into the vulnerability actually helped us begin the process of post-traumatic growth. and people like Andrea and many of the other direct survivors and victims have been incredibly inspirational to us, and we love them all. We really do.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for that encouragement. We were talking about media earlier, and I noticed that the media doesn't always, being a member of the media as well, cover the after, what happens after. Like what the great stories we're hearing about, the healing and people coming together in the Charleston and in Pittsburgh, and how you're trying to pull it all together. We don't hear that story often because there's always another news story, right, Dave? There's always another one. And I'm grateful that you're here and you've been strategic and not overusing the name of the person who caused the tragic event. But how are these decisions made from day to day? We're talking about a news radio station. Your just overall thoughts in general.
Sure. With specific regard to the name of the accused, I'd love to say we were thoughtful about this. We were reactive. There was a groundswell of listeners saying, how dare you mention him? You're glorifying his name. It really does not serve the healing purpose to name him. So then me and basically the entire newsroom kind of had a little huddle and said, what are your thoughts here, folks? My initial gut reaction, and I think part of what informed the rest of our thinking was, especially if the reporting is about his court case, that it is incomplete journalism not to use his name. But we know that his name is triggering. We know that what he did was triggering. So if we can avoid it, we will, but we're not going to, as some listeners wanted us to, put an outright ban on using his name or his photo. To me, that's bad journalism. And then as the discussion went around the room, I have two people on my staff. I wish it was more. I have two people on my staff that were people of color. And my managing editor, a woman of color, said, wait a minute, this guy doesn't deserve anonymity, especially in a world where there are mugshots of Black men on TV every night. This man does not deserve anonymity. And she went even further. She said, it's kind of like hiding behind a hood. He represents this racism. We need to talk about this racism, and this racism needs to have a name, and the name is his. So based on that, I kind of drafted up a statement that we send out whenever listeners question, how are you glorifying him? Why are you glorifying him? And I think journalistically, it would be wrong not to name him. Racially, there's a real good argument to be made that he doesn't deserve that anonymity. And then the last part of the equation for me is, how many of you know of Kim Kardashian? I don't think my station has mentioned her name at all, probably in the past 6 months, and yet she is still famous. So the third part of that point is, whether we mention him or whether we don't mention him does not contribute to his fame. It's not like we are mentioning him in a way that says, the great, wonderful shooter, not at all. I think that to just put an overall ban on the use of his name would be wrong for those 3 points. But to answer your question again, a little more broadly, Sandy, we are an NPR station. I think our approach to news historically has been perhaps a little more thoughtful. Our newsroom has a lot of discussions on topics like this, sometimes triggered in this case as it was from a listener complaint or inquiry, but other times, I have a reporter on staff who is disabled and who concentrates on covering disabled issues. And every time we meet, she's always throwing another log on the fire saying, hey, can I talk about language here for a moment? Can we discuss whether it's appropriate to use developmentally disabled or not? She in a lot of ways is a catalyst for those kind of discussions. I think I've got the kind of newsroom that is prepared to keep me honest and to keep me where we need to be. So a lot of times these decisions are made because we'll get a comment over the transom. Other times it's just because, not to toot our horn, but we're a thoughtful place where the newsroom kicks these kind of ideas around. And then as the head of the newsroom, I'll listen to what everyone says and make up on my mind and then sort of throw it back at them. We still, with everybody out of the building to some degree, we communicate a lot on Teams. I'll throw it back to them on Teams and say, does this all make sense? Is this a decent compromise position that hears you all, but still moves the newsroom forward. And we do that with a lot of our policies.
Well, not all TV stations, not all networks do. Thank God you are thoughtful, WBFO, and you're going to be challenged even more as you move forward, as the story progresses. And so the fact that you're thoughtful and you're listening, it means that there's a good chance that we're going to get not just the accuracy that we usually get, but we're going to get more insightful reporting that will continue at WBFO.
And then part of it's transparency. After we made this decision and after I drafted up a little statement that we send out when listeners ask, I've also got a couple paragraphs that we tag on the end of any web story that mentions this guy, where we say, hey, we're not going to ban his name, but we're going to be judicious about it. And our reasoning is that as I explained earlier, that there's both a journalistic and a racial reason for it. So that paragraph at the end of each one of the stories that actually names him does at least explain this to the public. So if they disagree with us, they can at least say, hey, yeah, you were thoughtful.
Well, I thank you for that and being thoughtful, because media does fan the flames no matter where you turn, maybe on some stations or networks than others.
Right.
But I appreciate the fact that you are giving it your all to hear different points of view and have a staff that reflects it. Thank you. All right, Kelly, I got a question for you. What are some of the things we can do to help get past the hesitation of walking into that location again? And I've got to tell you, Kelly, I've been hesitant. I drive up and down Jefferson. That is my supermarket. And I have been hesitant.
Yes, you are not alone, Sandy. Full
Mhm.
disclosure, I have hesitancy as well. I'm not ready to walk back in there. Like I said, I have personally I was on the location, and over the weeks and months, we still have teams that are there working, and the trauma is like we're so used to having to be okay to keep pushing forward. I think it's making it okay to be okay. As someone mentioned earlier, some people may decide they can never walk in there again, and that's okay.
And I hear it is beautiful. I'm hearing
Right.
rave reviews on the expansion at the Tops has
Yes.
gone to great lengths to make sure it is exactly what the community would want, with art and with services and organic food. I love organic and vegetables. But the thing is that I have it in my head and in my heart, and I'm just not ready.
That's right. And that's okay. I think people have to go at their pace and at their time and whatever that is, and we as a community, as a people, have to support that and not push people to be someplace that they're not ready to be yet. I'm going to push myself because that was also a supermarket I frequented often. That's where it was the good fried chicken and food, and I'm often in the community. So I'm going to push myself to do that. And I respect others who are just not ready.
You're giving yourself time to do it.
That's right. That's right.
I get it. And that's what it's going to take, time. I didn't
Yes.
realize time was a variable in this whole healing process. Tanel, because of the Charleston incident and how it happened in a place of worship, as it did in Pittsburgh, was the trauma deeper because it was shaking up people's faith? It's really hard to even ask that question, but could you please respond?
Well, I think any type of trauma can impact a person's faith, right? And there's all this why question. So I don't know if it was deeper. I think, again, the healing might be different in terms of, when you're working with specifically a faith community that was impacted. And, if you all paid attention to the story, the day he's in court, you have family members openly saying they forgive him, and there are families and communities who are on the side of that, and there were some who. So I think it does open up other types of questions and reactions that needed to be addressed, and still probably aren't really addressed. But yeah, definitely impactful in different ways. Not necessarily deeper, but impactful in different ways.
Thank you. And Maleen, for you, is it healing for you as an individual to hear about victims and their lives as their family members share their stories?
Yes, yes. Can I just back up a little bit though?
Yes, ma'am, you
I want
can.
to say thank you to Dave. First, I want to say thank you because when we initially had some conversation, we talked a little bit about saying the young man's name, and I kind of said that I really didn't want to hear his name. I didn't want to hear his name. But as you talk about it, Dave, this is why awareness is key. It's
Mhm.
key because as I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about it, it is like putting a hood on. He can hide if we don't hear it. And that is not okay. That is not okay. And people should, the family should feel good about knowing that there is a trial. Things are happening. And so I want to thank you for that. I also had some counsel with one of my counselors, which is my mother, and we discussed the store. I am not there yet. Okay. I was privy to see some of the video of some of the stuff that happened in the store, and so it just stopped me. Like I'm not there. But
Talking about the video that was streamed of the actual shooting by this
Yes.
racist, yes. Okay.
Yes, it wound up coming on my messenger halfway through it. Didn't even know what I was watching until I got close to the end and was like, so for me, that is etched in my mind.
We're with you. We're with you.
So a conversation with my mother was about, we discussed the importance of going back. And so when we discussed it, it just kind of made me see it from a different light, At first,
What did Mama say?
my mother said, we cannot let this person create that fear in us. We cannot let this person stop us from living. Even though there were some things that you've seen and some things that happened, those things could stop us from living our lives. And that TOPS is important. Like Kelly said, we already didn't have all of the resources we needed. We already didn't have
The food
all of the
desert.
stuff that should have been put in place. And so now that it's starting to come, now my fear, my sadness, what I seen, my trauma to stop me, at some point I have to come past that. And at some point I will go into that store. At some point I will get myself together and I'm going to march into that store knowing that, I cannot let this person change my life in hopes that we all don't let this person change our lives. So
Mama was right. Mama was right. And I think that she probably has seen over her lifetime that this is the way you do it. You move forward and not let evil define you and your future.
Our society is built on traumatic events. And like you said, we continue, right? And we continue and we go on to discuss about the media. I feel like the media is important in providing information to us. I know that the exposure of disaster and traumatic events is associated with feelings of anxiety, depression, PTSD symptoms, and those things can also lead to substance use, right? A lot of people say, I smoke a lot of cigarettes, right? But here, I think we need to provide those supports and to continue discussing coping skills, ways of coping with loss, ways of coping with negative feelings and emotions. But here we need to identify personally what is too much, right? Because we can't stop what's going to be on the air. But it's important to hear the victims' names, and their lives, like who they were, they serve the community in some way or another. It's a twofold because at times we say too much information is too much and it's re-traumatizing, but we're talking events like mass shootings. Like, is it worth it? I say yes. I say that we shouldn't let these lives be forgotten. The families deserve to know that their loved ones are not forgotten. Change must happen. And that happens with awareness. Like there's been over 300 mass murders in the United States. Gun violence is massive, right? And so I believe that those names should ring out, you know, who they were, their stories should be told. Not only can this be a healing point for families, but it can change the dynamic of what this predator assassin wanted: destruction, fear, confusion, right? So it has to be a personal decision of what is too much. But the world needs to know that we're here, we make the world go around, and we make a difference.
And you're gonna let your light shine.
And I'm going in that store. I'm going in that store. I'm gonna pray on it. My God got it. I'm gonna pray on it. And I'm gonna go into that store. And I'm gonna keep talking to the families. And I'm gonna keep going on Jefferson and to the Wiley Center and talking to my clients and trying to create healing while I also work towards healing within myself as a Black woman. Because
I think you motivated me to drive up to Buffalo to go to the store.
Listen, come on, let's go.
Let's go. Come on, Kelly.
I'd like to go with you.
Come on today. Let's go. It is beautiful. I looked at it online, and kudos to those who took a stand and said, we will not let evil win. But we will not forget as well the names of those individuals who are no longer with us. And there's so many that have been impacted. I wanted to, before we wrap up, just to give our panelists, this has been healing for me, just talking. You know, I'm a journalist, but I have feelings too, and I hurt too. And I know each and every one of you in the community doing amazing work, Kelly and others, you have feelings too. So let's wrap it up with just some thoughts about just this conversation we've had. And for those that are tuning in, that are just getting a sense of what we're talking about, give them hope on how to move forward. We'll start with Brian.
Thank you again. I feel so elevated being among such an incredible group of individuals. I think what I've learned in this period of time is that resilience is walking and walking and walking until you don't think you can walk anymore. And then taking a breath, pausing, and walking some more. And I think that's what everybody's doing here. We're building agency and finding paths to move forward.
Wonderful. Andrea. And Andrea, is it Andrea, or please correct me?
Andrea.
Andrea. You got it.
But I get everything. I've learned a lot about October 27, 2018. The names of the true heroes and those who made my recovery and those who made Pittsburgh's recovery possible. Those are the people that deserve the praise and the accolades, and I will always be indebted to them. I'll conclude with the following statement. White supremacy and all of its insidious brands of intolerance should not be so prevalent in our great country, because the damage it can cause is incalculable. Within hours of the shooting, the mantra "stronger than hate" appeared everywhere in Western Pennsylvania. And I truly believe that love conquers hate. It has to. I hope that Buffalo, Charleston, and all other communities that have experienced mass shooting and hate crimes can start to recover like our community has. You can't change what happened, and you need to look forward. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Kelly?
Yes, I'm glad to have this healing space for conversation. This conversation and conversations like this is healing. I just want to encourage people to keep hope alive. We're Buffalo strong. We are going to recover and move past this and be stronger for it. I do want to, and I think the way we do that is by having difficult conversations, being patient with each other, but making sure we have difficult conversations. Racism that led up to this is a lie. And that doesn't mean everyone is bad, but we can't ignore that there are some evil, hate-filled people out there, and we need to speak against that and really push that there's no room or space for that in our communities and not try to hide or cover it. And one thing I want to say about the food desert, because I heard someone mention it, I hadn't thought of it. This that happened and what exists in the Jefferson community is not a desert. Desert is a natural creation. It's a food apartheid that's created by man. And we, just like man created that, we can change that. That's not a natural desert creation of why there's such a lack of food and resources there. That was by design. Again, racist systems that we need to break against. I think we can do that. And I'm glad to be a part of conversations and actions to do so. And I'm going in that store.
Well, we'll probably be holding hands going in there. How
Yes.
All right, Maleen. All right, let's continue just our final comments. Dave?
I too, I think Brian said it well, feel elevated just by being on a panel like this. My role obviously is a little different than the rest of yours. I want to watch that recovery. I want to make sure that our attention is focused on the right things, like Kelly said. And if there was a closing thought that I had is, a lot of times as we do these interviews about what's coming next or how the community is recovering, my final question in almost any one of them, and it's a sort of a structural thing, because you can't just end an interview with a wham bang and, oh, okay, we're done. So I always try to end on a note that is really evocative. And the question that I think I've been asking a lot at the end of almost every interview is, are you optimistic? And regardless of how long during the previous interview the person has talked about systemic racism or disinvestment in that part of the community, or all the other ills that, again, Kelly sort of alluded to, regardless of how long they have spent the entire interview talking about that, I ask people if they're optimistic, and I haven't had a single person yet say, no, I'm not. I think that people see recovery. I think people want recovery, and they know that it's going to happen. They probably just aren't sure what that looks like yet, but none of us are.
But it's possible.
Mhm.
All
They're
right.
optimistic.
Right, who haven't I spoken with? Tanel, final comments?
Yes, thanks again for having me. I just want to tell everyone who's listening that part of the healing process is recognizing that you are forever changed, and it's not about bouncing back. And whenever I talk about resilience, I'm always using Arthur Ashe's favorite quote. And sometimes it really just means starting where you are, what's happening right now, using what you have. That means recognizing who you are and the people in your community are, and how you all can get through this journey together, because you don't have to do it alone. And doing what you can. And some days that might mean nothing, and other days that may mean moving mountains. And it's okay for you to be where you are. Just don't do it alone, and stay connected to healing, hope, and strength of yourself and other people. Again, thank you for having me. And I definitely am here if anybody ever need anything.
Yes, thank you so much, Tanel.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. And then Maleen, you want to close this out?
I want to thank you for inviting me to have the discussion again. This is, it really felt really good. I want to quote somebody who was on the news, a young lady, and she said, we are not broken, we're just bruised. And we will continue to grow and thrive. I feel like we as the people, in order to deal with this type of trauma, we should, and just life struggles in general, we should work on our self-care, make sure that we're trying to gain as many coping skills as possible. Just like Tanel said, work on our mindfulness techniques and lean on our supports. When dealing with any type of trauma, it can definitely cause isolation and for us to be alone in it. But this is a place of saying we don't have to, be mindful of when you're looking at the news, what is too much? It's only for you to decide, and so in my final thought, I do want to say again that I think that the names should ring. And I wish I was able to say all of the names of all of the people who have not survived and survived these mass shootings. But if you just give me 2 moments, I would like to say the names. Aaron Salter, Pearlie Young, Garner Whitfield, Roberta Dury, Deacon Patterson, Geraldine Talley, Marcus Morris, Celestine Cheney, Andre McNee, Catherine Massey, Ruth Whitfield, Andre McNeil, and the living, Zari Goodman, Jennifer Warrington, and Christopher Brandon.
Andrea, are there some names that your mom's name, and if there's any others, because Maleen, that's beautiful. You want to mention your mom's name?
Rose Mallinger.
Dave, is there anyone you want to mention?
Let me see if I can think of everybody.
That's
Rose-
okay. That's
Um,
okay. It's all
okay.
right. I just was following up what Sister White was just mentioning. It was very powerful. I'll let her continue and then we'll complete the program today.
This was a beautiful setting. This was a beautiful setting, and I hope that we reach many people. I hope that we created some enlightenment in everyone, and people are able to see that we can come together and have these discussions from thousands and thousands of miles away. And we can come together. We can work in unity to try to create a better world, because this senseless trauma, it makes no sense, and it will not ever make any sense. Because like you said, after the death, we still have to continue going, no matter what. I thank you.
Thank all of you for participating today. I feel better just being in your midst. So thank you so much. Thank you for your participation, and Spectrum Health produces these seminars periodically, and there will be another one coming up later this summer. So we want you to stay tuned to that one. Coming up this Sunday, July 24th, our Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra will be at the Johnny B. Wiley Pavilion at 4 p.m. to give a concert for healing. It will be free. And the full concert, Maestro Joanne Violetta with soloist Sigourney Cook and Reverend Julian Armand Cook will perform pieces that inspire quiet reflection. Should be wonderful. And resiliency. So we hope you will stop by the Johnny B. Wiley Pavilion. Music brings unity to the community, and so we ask you to join us. So thank you for joining us today. What a spirited conversation, a spirit of healing and love. Look for the recording that will be posted on Facebook later today, and wishing you peace as we all heal together. May God bless.